Daniel, my late husband, and I had built a small white cottage there, brick by brick, dream by dream. It was everything we ever imagined. The early years with Daniel were nothing short of idyllic. We worked hard, saved money, and built a life we were proud of. We loved the quiet of Vermont, the crisp winters, and the gentle breezes of spring that carried the scent of the blooming flowers. It was here that I raised my son, Jason. From the day he was born, I poured my heart into him. I made sure that every need was met and every dream supported. I was his mother, his first teacher, and above all, his safe haven. Jason was a curious boy, always asking questions and seeking to understand the world around him. He spent hours with me in the garden, learning the names of flowers, asking about the stars, the birds, and the wind. He loved school, and I made sure to be there for every milestone. From the first day he rode his bike without training wheels to his first kiss, I was there, every step of the way. We were a team, Jason and I, but life has a way of changing. The first time I truly felt the distance between Jason and me was when he left for college. I had known that day would come, but nothing prepared me for how it would feel to be alone in the house. The silence was suffocating. Daniel was there, of course, but we both knew that our role as parents had evolved. Jason was no longer a child, and it was time for him to spread his wings. Still, I did not expect it to happen so quickly. In the first few months after Jason left, I could feel the change. He did not call as much. He was busy, he said. He had new friends, new responsibilities, a life that did not involve me as much. I understood. At least I tried to. I kept myself busy, volunteering, gardening, reading books that Daniel and I had always meant to read together, but never did. I thought that would fill the void, but nothing could replace the connection I had with Jason. As the months passed, I began to feel like a ghost. It was not intentional. Jason did not mean to make me feel invisible, but I could not ignore the fact that our relationship was changing. Calls became less frequent. Visits became rarer. Jason's life in California, where he had moved for work after graduation, seemed to consume him. And the small, quiet life I lived in Vermont was no longer enough to bridge the gap. I was just the woman who once raised him, no longer the center of his world. One of the hardest moments came on Thanksgiving. I had planned to visit him in California, to spend the holiday with him and his new family. But when I called, Jason sounded rushed. "Mom, I am really sorry, but I have got a lot of work right now. It's not a good time. Maybe next year?" The words hit me like a cold slap to the face. I had given everything for him, and now it seemed he was too busy for his own mother. I sat in my quiet living room that Thanksgiving, a single plate of turkey and mashed potatoes in front of me. I could not eat. I could only stare at the empty chair across from me, where Jason would have sat just a few years ago. I felt as though I had been cast aside, discarded. I tried to push these thoughts aside, telling myself that this was just a phase, that this was what grown children did. They become independent, they form their own lives. But deep down, I could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. My son was slipping away, and I did not know how to stop it. The final straw came one winter evening when I slipped on the icy steps in my backyard. It was not a bad fall, but I twisted my ankle badly. The pain was sharp, but it was not the physical injury that hurt the most. It was the realization that, once again, I was alone. I called Jason, hoping to hear his voice, hoping he would comfort me. When he finally picked up, there was an exasperated sigh on the other end. "Mom, can we talk later? I am kind of in the middle of something right now." He never called back. That was when I realized the truth. I was no longer important to him. I was not his priority anymore. I was just an obligation, someone he checked off his list when it was convenient for him. The boy I had raised with so much love and devotion had forgotten me, or worse, he had chosen to forget me. I was hurt, devastated, but I was not angry. No, the anger did not come until later. What I felt in that moment was an overwhelming sense of loneliness, the kind of loneliness that seeps deep into your bones, that makes you question your worth. I had given him everything, and now I was nothing more than a stranger in his life. I knew something had to change. I needed to find out if Jason still cared for me, or if I had simply become a relic of his past. I had to know the truth, but how could I make him see what he had done? How could I make him understand the pain he had caused me? That is when I came up with the idea. It was not a plan I came to lightly, but something inside me told me it was the only way. I would leave everything behind. I would pretend to be homeless, to be destitute. I would go to California and knock on his door, pretending that I had lost everything. I needed to know if he would take me in. I needed to see if he would offer me the same love and care that I had given him all his life, or if he would simply turn me away. I sold the house. I sold the house that Daniel and I had spent years building. I transferred the money to a private account and made sure no one knew about the sale. Not Jason, not Rachel, no one. I packed a small suitcase with only the essentials and left behind everything else. The jewelry, the family heirlooms, the furniture that had been passed down through generations. I left it all behind. It was just me now. Me, and the need to test my son's love for me. I did not tell anyone where I was going. I bought a one-way bus ticket to California and set off with nothing more than a few dollars in my pocket, an old cardigan, and a broken suitcase. I had no plan beyond this. I did not know what would happen once I arrived, but I knew I had to do this. The journey took me several days, but when I arrived in California, I felt the weight of everything that had led me here. It was like stepping into a new world, a world where I was no longer important, where I was nothing more than a forgotten memory. I showed up at Jason's door. He did not recognize me at first. It took him a minute to open the door. When he saw me standing there, his face was a mixture of confusion and shock. "Mom?" he asked. I smiled weakly. "Hi, sweetheart. I had nowhere else to go. I lost everything. I am so sorry to bother you." For a moment, there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Something like guilt, perhaps. But he stepped aside and let me in. Rachel greeted me with an awkward smile, her eyes darting between Jason and me. She said something about the guest room being under renovation, but offered to clear space for me in the basement. And so, I became a shadow in their house. I spent the next 2 weeks in the basement. It was cold, damp, and filled with old boxes. There was no room for me in their lives. I washed the dishes. I folded the laundry. I cooked dinner. But none of it mattered. Jason barely made eye contact, and Rachel was always on her phone, never really acknowledging my presence. The kids, Caleb and Mia, did not even seem to notice I was there. One morning, I found a chore chart on the basement door. My name was on it. I was not even surprised. I had become nothing more than a maid in their home. I had become a ghost. Then came the final blow. I overheard Rachel and Jason talking late one night. "She needs to leave, Jason. This is not working." "I know," Jason replied. "I will talk to her tomorrow." The next day, Jason took me out to lunch. "I think it's time we explore other options," he said, his voice quiet and apologetic. "Maybe a senior facility. I found a few that look nice." I looked at him, my heart heavy. "Do you really believe I am a burden to you?" "I did not mean it like that, Mom," he said, his voice faltering. "It's just hard. We were not prepared for this." I nodded. I did not argue. I did not cry. I simply said, "Thank you for your honesty." 2 days later, I left. I rented an Airbnb under a different name. I did not want them to know where I was. I did not want them to feel obligated to help me. I needed to handle this on my own. I bought a modest condo in a nearby city. It was not much, but it was mine. I called Eleanor and asked her to send me the few belongings I had left. But the most important thing I did was contact a lawyer. My will had once been written to leave everything to Jason, every penny I had, every possession Daniel and I had accumulated over our lives. But now, I rewrote it. 90% of my estate would go to a women's shelter. The remaining 10% would go to Jason. But not without a letter. I sat down to write the letter to Jason with trembling hands. Every word seemed to come from a place deep within my heart, a place I had not allowed myself to visit for a long time. It was not easy to let go of the years I had spent raising him, or the dreams I had once held for us both. But the truth was, I no longer recognized the man he had become. And perhaps I had to face the painful reality that he no longer recognized me either. The letter was simple, but it said everything I needed to. Jason, I hope this letter finds you well. First, I want to say thank you for all the years we had together. From the moment you were born, I have loved you with all my heart. I have watched you grow from a small boy into the man you are today. And though I may not be a part of your life the way I once was, I want you to know that I am proud of who you have become. However, the last few years have been painful for me. I have watched as you pulled away, as I became less and less important to you. You never meant to hurt me, I know that. But the truth is, it felt as though I became invisible to you. The calls grew infrequent, the visits stopped, and when I needed you the most, you could not find the time for me. It was a crushing blow, one I still do not know how to process. I wanted to believe that we could fix things, but I realize now that I have been holding on to a version of you that does not exist anymore. I have learned to let go, Jason. I have learned that love cannot be forced, and sometimes even the deepest bonds fade with time. I have rewritten my will. The majority of my estate will go to a non-profit organization that supports women in need. It is something that has always been close to my heart, and I hope it will help others in the way I once tried to help you. As for you, Jason, you will receive a portion of my estate, but not in the way you might have expected. I want you to understand that I am not leaving you out of spite or anger. I simply hope that this will help you reflect on what we once had and the way you have treated me. Maybe one day you will understand, and maybe one day you will feel the need to reach out, but that is not my decision to make anymore. I want to believe that you will one day remember the love I gave you, that you will look back on our time together and regret the distance that has grown between us. But until then, this is my decision. With love, always, Mum. Once I had finished the letter, I sealed it in an envelope and placed it in a safe spot, alongside the legal documents for the new will. The weight of what I was doing sat heavy on my chest. It was final. It was done. I could no longer go back to the way things were, nor could I undo the hurt that had been caused. But somehow, I felt a sense of peace. It was not the peace that came with having everything fixed or resolved. No, it was a quieter kind of peace. The kind you get when you finally let go of something that's been dragging you down for too long. I was no longer holding on to false hopes or illusions. I had made my decision, and now it was time to move forward. The next few months were both painful and freeing. I settled into my new condo, surrounded by nothing but the bare essentials. There were no old photographs of Jason, no remnants of the life I once had with him. It was a clean slate. And while the silence was sometimes overwhelming, it was also a silence I had chosen for myself. I threw myself into my work with the women's shelter. The organization welcomed me with open arms. I spent my days organizing events, raising funds, and talking to women who had faced hardships far worse than my own. Listening to their stories helped me to see that there was so much more to life than the pain I had been holding on to. Their strength and resilience inspired me. It reminded me that I had my own strength too. Then one day, out of the blue, I received a call from Jason. It was the first time he had reached out in months. My heart skipped a beat when I saw his name on the caller ID. For a brief moment, I thought about letting it go to voicemail, but I could not. I had to hear what he had to say. "Mum?" Jason's voice sounded different, hesitant, almost unsure. I got your letter." I sat down, suddenly feeling very small. I was not sure what to expect from this conversation, but I knew that whatever happened, I had already made my peace. "I am listening," I said quietly. I am sorry, Mom. I do not know what to say. I have been an awful son. I took you for granted, and I did not realize what I was doing until it was too late. I do not expect you to forgive me, but I wanted you to know that I understand why you did what you did." I closed my eyes, feeling a lump form in my throat. I do not need an apology, Jason. What I needed was for you to see me, to love me the way I loved you. I know, he whispered. I did not know how to deal with everything. With Rachel, the kids, my career. It became so overwhelming, and I did not know how to balance it all. And I took you for granted. I did not say anything for a moment. The silence between us was thick, but it was not uncomfortable. It was a moment of reckoning, a moment where we both acknowledged the distance that had grown between us. Maybe we can start again, Jason said quietly. Maybe we can rebuild what we had. I sighed softly. Maybe, Jason. Maybe. But it's going to take time. I cannot just go back to the way things were. I need to see that you are committed to making things right. I will be. I promise. Over the next few weeks, Jason and I began to rebuild our relationship. Slowly, cautiously, but with a renewed sense of understanding. He visited me in California, and we spent time together, just the two of us. We talked about everything. We laughed. We cried. We confronted the mistakes we had both made, and we began the difficult work of forgiveness. I knew that things would never be the same. The bond we once shared was irreparably altered, but that did not mean it was lost forever. There was still hope, still room for healing. And I realized something important. Sometimes, the people we love most have to lose us in order to understand how much we mean to them. Sometimes, they need to see the consequences of their actions to truly appreciate what they had. And in the end, maybe that was the lesson I needed to teach my son. Reflecting on it now, I wonder, if you were in my shoes, would you have done the same thing? Would you have pretended to be something you are not, just to get the attention and love you deserve? Or would you have given up altogether? I had loved to hear your thoughts in the comments. Let me know how you would handle such a situation. As Jason and I spent more time together, I began to see glimpses of the man he once was. The boy who had grown up in my home, who had laughed with me, cried with me, and shared so many moments of joy. It was like peeling back layers of hurt and disappointment, each layer revealing something new, something that had been buried for far too long. There were still awkward silences between us, moments where we both stumbled over words, unsure of how to navigate the new dynamic between us. But those silences were different now. They were not filled with resentment or anger. Instead, they were filled with understanding, as though we were both trying to make sense of the mess we had created, piece by piece. I took him to the spot where we used to go when he was a child, a little park near our old home in Vermont. It was the place where we would picnic in the summer, where we would walk through the woods and talk about life, and where we would dream together. It had been years since I had been there, but when I saw it again, something in my heart shifted. It was as if I had come full circle. And as we sat on the old wooden bench, watching the sunlight filter through the trees, I realized that healing did not happen all at once. It was a process, a slow, steady process. I remember this place, Jason said, his voice thick with emotion. I used to love coming here with you. I know, I said, smiling softly. It's funny how time changes things, is not it? How things that were once so familiar can feel so distant. Yeah, he said, nodding slowly. I think about that a lot now, how I let everything slip away. I took you for granted. I was selfish. I did not say anything. I did not need to. His words spoke louder than any explanation I could offer. In that moment, I understood that Jason was not just apologizing for what had happened in the past. He was apologizing for the years of neglect, the years of emotional distance, and the years of taking me for granted. He was finally seeing me again, not just as his mother, but as a woman with her own life, her own dreams, and her own worth. I do not know if I can ever make up for what I did, Jason said, his voice breaking. But I want to try. I want to show you that I am better than this, that I can be the son you deserve. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I did not let them fall. I do not need you to be perfect, Jason. I do not need you to fix everything. I just need you to be present, to show up. That is what matters most." And for the first time in a long time, I believed him. I believed that he was ready to make the changes necessary to rebuild our relationship. It was not going to happen overnight. It was not going to be easy. But it was a start. The weeks that followed were filled with small gestures, each one meaningful in its own way. Jason began calling me more often, just to check in, just to say, "Hi." He made an effort to spend time with me, to visit me in California, and to engage in conversations that were not about work or obligations. He asked me about my life, my dreams, and even about the women's shelter I had been working with. I could see that he was trying, truly trying, to reconnect. Rachel, too, began to soften. She reached out to me, apologizing for her part in the situation. She admitted that she had been stressed, that she had not known how to juggle everything with the kids, work, and the demands of life. And while I appreciated her apology, I knew that the road ahead would be just as difficult for her as it would be for Jason. But I was not angry. I was not bitter. I had let go of that part of myself, the part that harbored resentment. Over time, things began to improve. It was a slow journey, but it was a journey nonetheless. There were still moments of tension, moments where the old wounds would resurface, but we were learning how to handle them. We were learning how to be a family again, one that was not defined by the past, but by the choices we made in the present. One day, while Jason was visiting me in California, he took me out to dinner. As we sat in the cozy restaurant, surrounded by soft candlelight, he took my hand in his and looked me in the eyes. "Mom," he said, his voice steady, "I have been thinking a lot about the future, about how I want things to be different between us. I want to be there for you, no matter what. I do not want you to feel alone again. I do not want you to ever feel like you are not important to me." My heart swelled with emotion, and I squeezed his hand. "I know, Jason, and I want that too. I want us to be close again. I want us to have the relationship we were always meant to have." And so, life continued. It was not perfect, but it was better. We still had a long way to go, but I had come to realize that love was not about perfection. It was about acceptance. It was about learning to forgive, not just others, but also yourself. It was about understanding that relationships were complex, and sometimes they required hard work to mend. But the most important lesson I learned through all of this was that I was worthy of love, not just from my son, but from myself. I had spent so many years giving everything I had to others, believing that my worth was tied to how much I could give, to how much I could sacrifice. But in the end, I had to learn that self-love and self-worth were just as important. I realized that it was okay to let go of the past, to accept that things would never be the same, and to find peace in the present. I did not need my son to validate me. I did not need his approval. What I needed was to find my own happiness, my own sense of purpose, and my own voice again. As I sit here now, writing this letter to you, I think back on everything I have been through. I think about the mistakes I made, the lessons I learned, and the ways in which I have grown. I think about the times I felt like I was invisible, like I was forgotten. But I also think about the times when I was seen, when I was heard, when I was loved. And I realize that those moments, however few and far between, are the ones that matter most. And now I want to ask you, what would you do if you were in my shoes? Would you have forgiven the person who hurt you? Would you have reached out to them, or would you have cut ties completely? What would you have done differently, and how would you have handled the situation? I had loved to hear your thoughts. Please share them in the comments below. Let's continue the conversation together. As the days passed, I realized something profound. Healing was not linear. It was not a smooth, straight path from pain to peace. There were days when I felt like we had made so much progress, and then there were days when I felt like we had taken 2 steps back. But through it all, I kept reminding myself that it was okay to be imperfect. It was okay to stumble, to fall, and to get back up again. What mattered was that I was trying, and that my son was trying too. Jason and I had many heart-to-heart conversations during this time. We had sit on the porch of my California condo, sipping wine, watching the sunset, and talking about everything and nothing. Sometimes we talked about the past, about the memories of his childhood. Other times, we simply enjoyed the silence, the comfort of being in each other's presence, without the weight of expectation or the pressure to fix everything. We were just two people, trying to make sense of the tangled web of our relationship. It was not always easy. There were moments when I had look at him, and all the old hurt would come rushing back. The times he had made me feel small, unimportant, or invisible. But instead of letting those feelings define us, I chose to acknowledge them, feel them, and then let them go. I learned that forgiveness was not about erasing the past. It was about letting go of the power it had over me. And so, I forgave him. Not just for his neglect, but for the way I had allowed myself to feel forgotten. I forgave him for the times when he had not been the son I had hoped for, and I forgave myself for the expectations I had placed on him. We were both imperfect, both human, and in that imperfection, we found a new understanding of each other. As time went on, Jason began to make a conscious effort to include me in his life again. He invited me to his home for family gatherings, and this time I was not relegated to the basement. Instead, I was part of the family again, sitting at the dinner table with his wife Rachel and the kids. We laughed together, shared stories, and even fought over the last slice of pizza. It felt like a miracle. Rachel, too, had begun to soften. She was no longer the distant woman who barely acknowledged my presence. Instead, she became someone I could talk to, someone who asked about my day and genuinely cared. I saw her trying to balance her own life with the demands of motherhood and marriage. I saw her struggling, just as I had struggled. And in that struggle we found common ground. It was not perfect. We still had our disagreements, our misunderstandings, but the walls between us began to crumble. Slowly we learned how to communicate better, how to listen without judgment, and how to offer support without expecting anything in return. Then came the day that I had been dreading. The day when I had to tell Jason about the changes I had made to my will. It was something I had put off for months, but I knew it was time. I knew that he deserved to understand why I had made the decision I had. One evening, after dinner, we sat down together in the living room. Jason looked at me, his expression serious, and I could tell he knew something was coming. "Mom," he said, his voice calm but cautious. "What is going on? You've been quiet lately. You have been so distant." I took a deep breath. This wasn't going to be easy, but I owed him the truth. "Jason, I have changed my will," I said, my voice steady but soft. "I have decided to leave the majority of my assets to a non-profit women's shelter, and the rest, I am leaving to you. But I want you to understand something. This is not about punishing you. It's about teaching you a lesson in compassion, in empathy, and in understanding." Jason's face paled, and I could see the shock in his eyes. "What are you talking about? Why would you leave everything to a shelter?" "Because, Jason," I said, my voice breaking slightly, "I want you to learn what it means to give, to help others, to not just take from life, but to give back. You've lived a life of privilege, but I want you to understand that not everyone has that privilege. Not everyone has the security, the comfort, the love that you have had. And I want you to remember that, always. I want you to remember that there is more to life than money, than success, than status. There is compassion. There is humanity." Jason was silent for a long time, his eyes searching mine. I could see the wheels turning in his head, the struggle within him. And then, slowly, he nodded. "I understand, Mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I do not deserve everything you have given me, but I am going to work hard to make sure I am the man you want me to be. I am going to try harder. I promise." Tears welled in my eyes as I reached across the table to take his hand. "I am proud of you, Jason, not because of what you have done, but because of the man you are becoming. You have learned something that so many people never learn, and that is the most important lesson of all." The years that followed were filled with more growth, more understanding, and more love. Jason and I grew closer than ever before. and our relationship became one of mutual respect and admiration. We had our ups and downs, but through it all, we knew that we were there for each other. We had finally found our way back to each other, not through grand gestures or perfect solutions, but through the simple, quiet act of being present in each other's lives. And as for me, I learned that my worth was never tied to the approval of others. It was not tied to my son, or anyone else for that matter. It was tied to the love I gave to myself, to the compassion I had for others, and to the strength I found within myself when everything seemed lost. And so, here I am, at the end of my journey. I have been through more than I ever thought possible. I have learned lessons I never thought I would have to learn, and I have come out stronger, wiser, and more at peace with myself. But now, I want to hear from you. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have made the same choices I did? Or would you have taken a different path? How do you navigate the complicated relationships in your life, and what do you think is the most important lesson we can all learn? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. I had loved to hear your perspectives. Thank you for listening to my story, and may we all find peace, love, and understanding on our own journeys.